Hi, everybody. I'm Jacqui Lewis, and this is Love Period, a podcast about how to love ourselves, our posse, and the world fiercely, on the way to making the world better. My guest today is the Reverend Amanda Hambrick Ashcraft. Amanda is an ordained Baptist minister, a mom to twin boys and a daughter, and one of the executive ministers at Middle Collegiate Church. She's a stunning community organizer and activist, and I'm delighted to have her join us today. Amanda Hambrick Ashcraft, I'm so glad you could join us today.
Thank you for having me, Jacqui. This podcast is so exciting.
It is such lovely conversations with people and all my different kinds of folks that I'm connected to, and I'm so glad to have this conversation with you. Amanda, it has been a wild year. I don't know how you and Graham did COVID and 3 children. I just don't know. Can you just talk a little bit about what it's been like for you as a parent, to parent your young people through this year?
Yeah, sure. As I am hearing screams, and I'm going to text my husband, got to keep it down out there. It's been a hard year. It's been a hard year for everyone for different reasons. And I have absolutely connected a lot with caregivers about the unique struggle that people who have had young people in the home during the pandemic has been. For us personally, it's been a complete reorientation of the way that we do care, because we do try to parent with such a village, and that wasn't allowed. Like the best way that you could love your village, the best way that you could be an intentional community member during the worst of COVID was by not having your community and not having your village. And of course, everyone had to navigate that, and that meant different things to different people. But the ease with which we were used to saying, hey, can you do this pickup, or can you take this shift, or now the kids are going to go here and this person's going to jump in here, we weren't able to do. And, our nanny, for just one thing, who had been with them since they were about 9 months old, she's 70 years old, and she, commutes in from the Bronx every day. And of course we weren't going to have her do that, like, ever during COVID. So it was a complete removal of that wonderful caregiver in their life initially, along with everything else.
Oh my gosh, Amanda. I'm so curious about how your children's upbringing is like your own. How did your folks do you, and how does that translate into how you raise your 3 children?
That's a great question. Do you want to start with how is it the same or how is it different?
Whichever one comes. Yeah, I bet it's some of both, right?
It's absolutely some of both. Yeah. My parents definitely raised us with a community mindset, and with an understanding that, it wasn't just about us per se, but in retrospect, that community was still what I would now be able to verbalize as a very white-centric and distanced way of being community. From the sense of, yes, we're going to talk about missions and service, and that's what it means to be a good Christian, but it fell a little bit short.
Okay.
So we would have, we would have conversations about, what it means to be a Christian in part is feeding people when they're hungry.
Right.
Great. And so we would do that. We would show up and we would feed people, or we would pack lunches. And those are actually opportunities that I'm looking more of now to get some hands-on stuff with my kids, interestingly enough. But what we wouldn't have is the conversation about why people are hungry.
Got it.
And we wouldn't take kind of that extra step of, and we don't want this to be a one-sided relationship. Like we wouldn't take that extra conversation of the danger of doing a service act like this is that one might think we're better than.
Right.
And not able to see the assets in the people who in that moment are in need of food. So that is, so that is something that we are trying to be more intentional about doing differently.
I love that. I love the way you said the assets in those folks. So, I want to ask you, like, where did you come from? Right. Every time I think of you, Amanda, and, we've told the story publicly before, just like, here is this woman with her children in this stroller and doing this thing and marching in the world. Where did you, Amanda, white, nice lady, born in the South, come from to be this revolutionary raising imagination?
I did come from a small town in Kentucky. That's where I grew up. And, as Jacqui said, I'm a white woman and was raised by two white parents, four additional white siblings. And in as much as my small town was a small town and so had conservative values, I grew up in a dry town as well, like completely dry town, one high school. And now in bigger cities and in bigger places, there's all these conversations about, even if you go to public schools, the schools have been zoned, and even the schools themselves can become, racially divided and divided by class. And of course they can. But when you live in a town with one high school, actually everybody's there. And so in that sense, I was really grateful to grow up in a small town with one high school, in a public school, because I was with all of the class and ethnic diversity that the small town in Kentucky had. And there are definitely formative moments and memories that I can think back to my high school on and be grateful for that. But, I mentioned before that I have definitely kind of grown in my understanding of my place in the world and how I want to live and move and, specifically parent. And I do think that my faith really did have a large role in that change. And what I mean by that is, right after I graduated from seminary, I didn't want to get ordained. I thought, I actually want to be in the streets all the time and in the community. And I don't know if I want to work in a parish, and that's not where I necessarily feel called. And I thought that my ordination might be some kind of barrier to the work that I wanted to do. And then around 2015, with all of it, just seemed like Black Death after Black Death. Mm-hmm. So we're thinking Ferguson, we're thinking Mike Brown, we're thinking Trayvon Martin, Alton Sterling, Tamir Rice. Something clicked inside me because I was seeing specifically Christianity being weaponized in a lot of ways and misappropriated, misused from what I had, come to understand being a Christian and Rabbi Jesus to be about. And I realized, actually, this is why you get ordained. And I just really had this moment of, wow, wouldn't it be powerful if I could be this white woman from Kentucky saying, wait a minute, I have something to say about what it means to be Christian too. And, what it means to be a woman, like in this world still, Jacqui, like actually titles matter. And, education matters, and like us saying like, no, we've done the work. Like, thank you.
It matters.
So I realized let's do that, because I feel my heart began to break in a way that it didn't have to, because of my privilege in my life up until that point. And my faith really inspired me to go ahead and get ordained and begin to really connect the dots between white supremacy and faith, and more recently, parenting.
Yeah. I'm so glad to just hear you say that. I want to make sure that we have a chance to talk a little bit about raising imagination. I've been so inspired, Amanda, no kidding, by the posts, the writing, the essays, the blogs, the conversations you have about raising little people and raising, I'm going to say, ethical, just, faithful, imaginative young people who can make a better world. Did you have that kind of imagination when you were a little person? And do your children raise your imagination?
Yes and yes.
Tell me
I thought I was going to be a rock star. That was
my
God, what? And here I have this beautiful mic that arrived in the mail to me.
Right.
And we're just making dreams come true over here on Love Period. But
I didn't know that you wanted to be a rock star. I
did. Yeah, I did. But I did. I had lots of imaginary friends, like kind of in the traditional sense that we usually put imagination in, kind of this fanciful, whimsical space. I definitely had a lot of that. But the imagination piece for me really kind of crystallized when I thought about what is the kind of public voice that I want to have in the world, and what is my kind of front line in this work. And I thought, well, activism, like I want to talk about how to raise upstanders, how to raise activists, how to raise, citizens, and like that's going to be my thing. But then I had conversations with some like kind of marketing gurus in my life, actually. And they said, is that really what you want to do? Let's think about it a little bit longer. Like, is that really how you want to talk about what you're doing? And we went through this exercise where I was able to just really kind of express what it was that I wanted to do. And a word that kept coming back was raising. Whether it was raising actual humans in the home, like, literally raising them, or raising a collective consciousness, or raising an awareness of people and places and cultures that I had been able to not see or not know before. So I really was on to this word raising. And then when I thought about, for me personally, what does activism mean? Like, what does this kind of being a good citizen, a good human mean? It really is about kind of giving people the tools that they need to be able to understand the history, understand the present, and then understand, have some kind of moral, ethical compass to be able to then say, and now here's how I'm going to choose to decide because of it. And here's how I'm going to choose to live, knowing all of this. Because what I don't like about, ideologies and political parties and theologies that I feel like are on a very different end of a spectrum for me is that they are very rigid. And that they are very, dogma centered. And here's what it is. Like in order to be this, you have to be this, and handed down to you. So I thought to myself, I don't also want to be the parent that's like, hey, here's what it means to be a socialist. Like, here's what it means to be a progressive, universalist or whatever. Because then I also was just kind of spoon feeding information and ideologies. And so rather, it's actually about raising an imagination, like raising a mindset in a toolkit for people to be able to have within themselves what they need to make ethical and just decisions. And of course, yes, Jacqui, like my children, to your other question, that, that's one of the first things I realized, like, wow, when you do have young people around you all the time, you actually have to work out your own theology all the time as well. Yeah. And, just to give you an example from literally Sunday, one of the preachers at Middle Church on Sunday was a white man, and he really used some performance art in his homily. Naked, like literally looked naked from the viewer's eye. And so my little ones, they're 7, 7, and 5 now, had been just like running around, and then all of a sudden they just stopped and were like, what's he doing? And this preacher named Isaac, he kept referring to himself as a white male, because he is. Right. And so then all of a sudden my kids are, oh, why is he talking about white males? I'm a white male. And I was like, yes, you are. So like, let's listen. And then, at one point he said something about, until white people can identify with the blood on the street, We are not living up to really who we could be. So these are like Sunday morning worship questions
Yes.
That Graham and I really try to not shy away from. And I think about, how to go back to your first question, how would that have been different from the way I was raised, or how, let's just also say, I know a lot of white parents raising white kids also parent. You don't have that difficult, messy conversation. One, you don't set the table for it, so you're probably not worshiping a middle church. So, I mean, that's a thing.
Right.
But then two, if something like that were to come up, well, that's not really what he meant. So, that's not really for you. That's for another audience. Instead of like, let's really talk about it and say like, well, he's talking about, when we've talked about more recently, Breonna Taylor and George Floyd dying and what comes out of your body when you die, blood, and how can we relate to the feeling of death, of which a lot of Black people right now in America relate to and have to feel every day, so just really kind of going at the hard conversation, and with an awareness that more often than not, we say, I need to think about that too. So like actually in that moment, we said, hey, we want to finish worshiping and listening to the whole thing, but let's definitely talk about that later. And I'm going to also need to think about what that means to me as a white person to identify with blood on the street.
So beautiful. Love Period will continue in a moment. I love that we get to talk about and live out our commitment to racial justice and equality, together in a space like Middle that is all the things. And I was thinking the other day, Amanda, about this craziness about critical race theory and how somehow to talk about racism is to deliver low self-esteem to white people. And you've got, 3 white children and a white husband. And what do you think about the love of self in this conversation? Like, what do you think about loving yourself, them loving themselves in the context of all the conversations about blood on the ground, about racism, about white supremacy? Like how do we raise love also, in that?
That's a great question, because the kind of binaries, the not helpful binaries would be either, oh, I'm white, so I actually hate myself, or I'm white and I'm better, and now so I'm the savior, and so my mom's telling me all this because I'm better and I can save, right? And neither one of those are it. And I think even finding places to be able to say maybe even just that, like, and we have said before, there's nothing wrong with your skin color. We do say to have white skin is not a bad thing. But the way this country has grown up and created what it means to be white is not a good thing. And it's so pervasive. And we do talk about like Beverly Tatum's smog. We do say like that's a thing that I feel like does resonate with children well. It is so pervasive that is what we walk around in. That's what we swim in, like Racial Equity Institute will say. And so how can we be smart swimmers?
Good. That's really beautiful. Is it ever difficult for you to love you or your people in this context of the world? Like, where's it tough? And how do you get it back if it slips away?
We work at a multiracial staff and congregation, intentionally so, thanks to your crafting, Jacqui. And there are days that I'm like, nobody wants to see me today. And I don't want to see myself. Like I do have white skin. Like I'm going to show up today, like, and also be a leader in this space. Feels very hard some days, but then I have to, have the conversation with myself. Well, Amanda, it's actually not about you. And, in fact, that is kind of a white way of thinking also. But it is about really the pervasiveness of whiteness and the sin of white supremacy. And so I just, I try to say, look, if I am showing up with good intentions, that's worth something. I think good intentions without accountability is very dangerous. And I definitely need to find more time and intentionality in the accountability piece in all of my life's practices. Like, you know, who am I accountable to? And like, Jacqui, I think you and I have some good practices with that. I'll say like, Jacqui, is it right for me to go in here and say this? Like, is this, you know, but that is definitely an area in my life where I feel like I could have improvement. You know, what does accountability look like? And am I always accountable to, in this specific conversation, you know, Black people, Black women? So that is something that's true. Is it hard for me to love white people? Yeah, definitely. You know, all the times that I would imagine, Jacqui, some of the things you're recalling that have been really, really painful experiences in the world, you know, in the past, whatever, 5, 6, 8 years, for you, this is not anywhere near a comparison, but at those same moments, there have definitely been white people in my life who have made me sad and who have disappointed me and who have made me not love. Well, let me think if I'm saying that right, since we're talking about love here. Is it that I'm not loving them, or is it that I'm loving them well? Or is it,
Amanda, that love, the kind of love we're talking about, the kind of fierceness of love, is it that love can be disappointed hugely? Is it that love can feel like it wants a break? I mean, is it that love can feel really, angry and sad and disappointed? I don't know. I think so, right?
Yeah. And also, I like what you said, need a break, because, you know, for instance, I'm thinking about right after the 2016 election, and, you know, I was being very vocal in ways that I probably wouldn't now. You know, shame really doesn't move people. And everyone listening, that is really a true thing. But
that's true.
But I was called a bigot and a horrible person by, you know, cousins publicly, and in those exact moments, I was like, I don't know what love looks like in this moment.
Oh, that's so honest. That's so real.
I didn't do anything right away. And to be honest with you, Jacqui, that's still unfinished. Like, that specific example
is unfinished. How honest are you? To me, that's loving. To me, honestly, to say, I don't know about that. I think if you don't love, you can fake that it's okay. But if you do love, you can have that heartbreak. You guys know, you and I have been talking about heartbreak this week, but you can have a kind of heartbreak that literally causes you pain because you do love, and some people hurt you and disappoint you, you know?
And I do think, and this is, you know, something that's true for several of my relationships, you know, I've said enough or I've done enough now so that there is an awareness that, like, hey, we're not on the same page here. We're not tracking well.
Right.
But I haven't necessarily gone to all the people face to face that I could and say, I need you to know why, though. And not because it's about me, but because I believe so strongly that this is what it means to love. And it hurts me that you think you are, that it's that. And so can we have a conversation, you know, about that? Would really be a great way to love.
Well, you know, I think ideally, right? I mean, what I hear you saying, Amanda, is your love for the world, your faith in the world, your Rabbi Jesus mentored, you know, care for how the world would look. Sometimes that love for the world is, can we just say the love for the world, or the love for the world's best self, can feel in conflict with the individual relationship love?
Oh, that's great.
I'm working that, right? I'm just working that out as we're saying that, but I think that's right. Like, I bumped into that, you know, for me, it was queerness. Like, you know, I didn't even know my family I did not know that we had some homophobic action going on in our family. I just didn't know until I got to middle, quite honestly, and was at a reunion with some of my cousins. Hi, cousins who are listening. My cousins and my siblings, and there was just energy around, what are you going to teach them, about them being gay. God loves them exactly as they are. And even now, even recently, one of my family members said, I've really wrestled with your love of the queer and love of the trans, but God bless you. You're doing God's work for the people on the margins. I was like, okay, that's not exactly where I want you to be. Right?
Yeah. I'm going to be thinking about that for a long time. It's like, yeah, we have this ideation of the best world that it can be. And what do we do when that comes into conflict with individual relationships? That's a really great question. And it reminds me too of, like Barbara loves liberatory consciousness. And, I preached about that at Middle when I did Imagination. I think it was last summer, but just really this notion that like, actually that world is possible.
Yes.
And we each have a part to play in it.
Yes.
And that includes, naming our faults, naming when we come short. But always, if we're starting with this, shared premise that a world free of racism is possible, then, how do we get there?
Yeah.
But I also think that beginning with that kind of shared liberatory dream is not the same place that many white people are, which makes that even hard too.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, where do you make that kind of leap? I know we're all over the place here, but we talk a lot about like, it's really not about saving anybody else except yourselves, white people. Like it really is, you becoming the best human that you can be when you can free yourself of white supremacy. But that is a leap for white people.
Yes, it is. And Amanda, yes, it is. And I just love the opportunity, to think out loud, to talk out loud, to dream out loud about how actually that leap can be a breakaway. That leap, we've done that work at Middle, right? Where like, okay, y'all are going home to your people who voted for Trump, or the people who think that the insurrection was a picnic, or we are still living in the spaces where some of the people my age in America were on the shoulders of their parents watching lynchings. And they run corporations, right? And they like write books and they teach kids. So it really is a breaking away sometimes toward the reign of God, or toward the Tikkun Olam, that sometimes means you won't be having coffee with that person.
And you would you say, Jacqui, that is also like the fiercest love?
Yeah.
Like that's what it means to love? Like,
I think it is. And I think, hello, people who are listening, like not every day do you feel like you want to make that choice. But ultimately, I wrote the book and I wrote a chapter about confronting boldly. I think about the people I love the most. My dad, I love my dad so much. I think about how much he loves me. And I think about some of the tough conversations I've had about bigotry, or just, let that go, or don't say that. Like, can our love be so fierce that we love ourselves fiercely, that we expect the world to love its humans, its creation fiercely, and that sometimes there will be conflict when there isn't enough love. Would that preach? There'll be just conflict when there isn't enough love.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think this different understandings of love, like for one I have a lot of family members who would say, well, yeah, but I love by saying, let's just go back to the LGBTQ conversation again. Like, yeah, I'm loving them by teaching them that this is what the Bible says, in a very shaming, horrible, not correct way.
Yeah.
So
right.
It is also like, let's have a real conversation about what we think a true understanding of love is, and then how does that, you and I would say, and then what's the practical theology of that? How does that play out in our day-to-day lives?
So, Amanda, what do you know for sure about love?
Love is relational.
Mm-hmm.
I know that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I, again, going back to faith, I see that modeled in that comes from my faith, this very idea of the Trinity, that we really don't know the fullness about who Jesus is without knowing who Jesus is in relation to God. And we don't know all about God without, her relationship to the Spirit. And then it just keeps going and going. And also, from the prayer that we were taught, give us this day our daily bread, not me, not I. And so in all of these ways, that how to be is demonstrated in our holy texts, it's relational. Mm-hmm. And therefore, I have to extract that I can't know fully what it means to love alone. And also, I don't think that means that then there's, a romantic relationship then that will define that for us. But it really is a relational, communal way of being, which again goes back to what we talked about first. One of the things that was so hard, during the pandemic, when people were stripped of the way that they knew to be in relationship. In a way, we felt like we were stripped of some love, right?
That's right.
And that was just really hard. Of course, we figured it out and did it in different ways and did it in virtual ways, and that's beautiful. But there was a strain on love, the past 15 years. So I know that to be true about love. I know that love is always evolving. It's not stagnant.
Yeah.
Love is a process.
Mm-hmm.
I know that love is a question asker and an imagination raiser.
Beautiful.
And I know that love is courageous.
Yeah. Fierce.
And that's fierce. And that sometimes love disappoints.
One time I was writing a sermon and I was pushing against Paul's love does not insist on its own way. And I said, absolutely, love does insist on love. Actually, love does insist on love.
That's beautiful.
Amanda, I'm so glad I know you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacqui.
Thanks.
Love Period is
Corey Big,
Paul Swanson,
Izzy Spitz,
Sarah Janzak,
Jenna Kuiper,
Sarah Palmer,
Nicholas Kramer,
and I'm Calissa Brewster. This podcast is produced by the Center for Action and Contemplation, which is located in the heart of New Mexico, thanks to the generosity of our supporters. We also have other podcasts you might like. You can find those wherever you like to listen by searching for Center for Action and Contemplation, or visit us at cac.org to find out more about our other programs. From the high desert of New Mexico, we wish you peace and every good.